The combatants stripped, and a child might have seen in the contrast presented by the slight, lank form and limbs of the lad and the muscular and massive build of his veteran antagonist, how desperate was the chance of poor Ned Moran. Seconds and bottle holders, selected of course for their love of the game, were appointed, and the fight commenced. I will not shock my readers with a description of the cool-blooded butchery that followed. The result of the combat was what anybody might have predicted. At the 11th round, poor Ned refused to give in. The brawny pugilist, unhurt, in good wind, and pale with concentrated and as yet unslaked revenge, had the gratification of seeing his opponent seated upon his second's knee, unable to hold up his head, his left arm disabled, his face a bloody, swollen, and shapeless mass, his breast scarred and bloody, and his whole body panting and quivering with rage and exhaustion. "Give in, Ned, my boy!" cried more than one of the bystanders. "Never, never!" shrieked he, with a voice hoarse and choking. Time being up, his second placed him on his feet again. Blinded with his own blood, panting and staggering, he presented but a helpless mark for the blows of his stalwart opponent. It was plain that a touch would have been sufficient to throw him to the earth, but Larkin had no notion of letting him off so easily. He closed with him without striking a blow, the effect of which, prematurely dealt, would have been to bring him at once to the ground and so put an end to the combat. And getting his battered and almost senseless head under his arm, fast in that peculiar fix known to the fancy pleasantly by the name of chancery, he held him firmly, while with monotonous and brutal strokes he beat his fist, as it seemed, almost into his face. A cry of "Shame!" broke from the crowd, for it was plain that the beaten man was now insensible and supported only by the Herculean arm of the bully. The round and the fight ended by his hurling him upon the ground, falling upon him at the same time with his knee upon his chest. The bully rose, wiping the perspiration from his white face with his blood-stained hands, but Ned lay stretched and motionless upon the grass. It was impossible to get him upon his legs for another round, so he was carried down, just as he was, to the pond which then lay close to the old park gate, and his head and body were washed beside it. Contrary to the belief of all, he was not dead. He was carried home, and after some months, to a certain extent, recovered. But he never held up his head again, and before the year was over, he had died of consumption. Nobody could doubt how the disease had been induced, but there was no actual proof to connect the cause and the effect, and the ruffian Larkin escaped the vengeance of the law. A strange retribution, however, awaited him. It was about 3 years after the catastrophe we have mentioned, and late in the autumn, when, one night, contrary to his habit, he did not appear at the house where he lodged, neither had he been seen anywhere during the evening in the village. His hours of return had been so very regular that his absence excited considerable surprise, though, of course, no actual alarm. And at the usual hour, the house was closed for the night, and the absent lodger consigned to the mercy of the elements and the care of his presiding star. Early in the morning, however, he was found lying in a state of utter helplessness upon the slope immediately overlooking the Chapelizod Gate. He had been smitten with a paralytic stroke. His right side was dead, and it was many weeks before he had recovered his speech sufficiently to make himself at all understood.